So Norman Weinberg is a Longboat Key, Florida resident. He's an electrochemist turned microbiologist. He received an MA at the University of Toronto. He got his PhD at the University of Ottawa and did postdoctoral training at the Technion in Israel. He was part of the team at American Cyanide that discovered the world's first lithium battery. So you might want to talk to him as a physicist. And he and his wife, Hannah, also a scientist by training, owned and operated a successful R&D company, which worked on electrochemical projects for government and industry. They've been coming to Chautauqua for many years and have a condo on the grounds. And recently, so let me go back to, recently, Norman wrote a novel called Commandment Pandemic Unleashed. He did it before the pandemic. And it's for sale up here for $20. And all the proceeds will go to the science group. So thank you for doing that, Norman. We will let you then make your presentation, please.
Thank you, Bob. As I look out over the audience, I can't help but note that each one of you have 100 trillion, thereabouts, microbes in you and on you. And they're very intelligent. So who am I talking to this morning? Can you hear me all right? A little closer. You're okay? Okay. So what's bugging you? It has a number of meanings. It is about the microbes that are in us and around us, but it also has to do with what's bugging you. That is your emotions, your feelings every day, because they're very much a part of it, and I'll show you in this presentation. Okay, I'm doing something. Oh, here we go. First of all, I'm not a physician, and I'm not licensed to give medical advice. Consult with a licensed medical specialist before self-medicating with microorganisms. That includes loads of probiotics. I know people take them in handfuls. They're not necessarily bad for you, but make sure that it is for you. And I make no apologies should you decide this presentation is too sexually explicit, especially in a place like Chautauqua. What's bugging you is, here's a brief summary. Microbes inhabited the earth and likely the universe billions of years before mankind showed up. Microbes made us, and they remain a vital and integral part of us. Almost every cell in your body is microbial in some respect. A healthy gut microbiome, and I'll explain that, the microbes that are in us and on us means a healthy you. An unhealthy gut microbiome could be the major cause of violence, and perhaps even the mass shootings that we've witnessed around the country and around the world. Where are we? 13.7 billion years ago, the universe was created. 4.6 billion years ago, our solar system came into being. 4.1 billion years ago, anaerobic microbes living without oxygen inhabited the earth. 2.3 billion years ago, some of those anaerobes turned into cyanobacteria, which began producing oxygen, very oxygen that you breathe. So you need to be thankful to the microbes that produce the oxygen for your sitting here. 300,000 years ago, humans evolved from ancient microbial ancestors. I'm talking about microbes, and I'm talking about creation. And you might ask, and I'm talking about the so-called microbiome. I could ask the question, is God the microbiome of the universe? I didn't get struck down by lightning, so I'll go on. Here's a portrayal of evolution from the simplest of organisms to us, to more complex organisms. We're part of the eukaryotes, and we're related to everything, all life. We're related to all life. We didn't know about microbes until the microscope was invented. That was in 1590. And in 1676, Leeuwenhoek, a Dutchman, considered the father of microbiology, improved the magnification to 270 times and discovered microorganisms. And then stated, I then most always saw with great wonder, there were many very little living animalcules, very prettily moving. Little poetry in there. Hippocratic Oath, remember that medical people have to agree to. Greek physician, philosopher, and scientist, considered the father of Western medicine. For patients, he prescribed a vegetarian diet. Keep that in mind. And he stated, all disease begins in the gut. He stated, let food be thy medicine and medicine thy food. And that walking is man's best medicine. You got to move it. Here's my idea of gross anatomy to explain what the gut is, because I'm talking about gut. Food enters here, waste exits there. For the adult human, that gut is about 30 feet long. It's a hollow tube from mouth to anus. What does the gut do? It processes our food and eliminates waste products. It destroys pathogens. The acidity that's in the gut destroys the pathogens as well as other organisms that conflict with ones that come down through the gut. It's the reservoir for 2 to 3 pounds of microorganisms, mostly good, produces hormones and chemicals necessary for health. The gut is the major source of our emotions. Science teaches us trillions of microbes infect us, yet our immune system doesn't destroy them. That's evidence that microbes are a vital bodily organ. Science teaches us the microbiome is a second intelligent brain. Together, we constitute what has been named the holobiome. Holobiome. The gut, brain, and us. The virome, that is the viruses that infect us, are 10 times larger in number than our resident bacteria. War and peace are inherently gut responses. I'll have more to say about that. Microorganisms communicate with us. Are you listening? Maybe you have to be in the Negev desert, away from everything. And you'll hear voices, and you'll think that they come from a super entity. Are you listening? Nourish our holobiome. Avoid killing the good guys. What does that mean? Avoid antibiotics if you can possibly. Don't, when you go to your doctor and you say, I got a bad cold. If he prescribes antibiotics, question him or her. Many diseases originate in the gut. Anything from arthritis, asthma, autoimmune disorders, cancer, and so on, MS, obesity, starts in the gut. Gut microbial imbalances the term for that is dysbiosis, I'll mention that again, have been linked to most chronic diseases that afflict more than 100 million Americans. When you look in the mirror, you see only 10% of the real you. An estimated 100 trillion bacteria, 2,000 kinds, have been identified that live in and on us. Most are vital to our health. So what percent of a person is human? 99% of the DNA in our bodies is the DNA of bacteria living in and on us. Even the 1% of DNA that we call human is powerfully influenced by our microbiome. They influence our gut feelings, decision-making, instinct, perception, extrasensory perception, foreknowledge, insight, foresight, feelings in your bones, sexual attraction, emotions, love, happiness, pleasure, hate, anxiety, stress, fear, depression, hopelessness, suicidal feelings. When you come up close to a person, their external microbiome is mixing with yours. And you may have an instinctive like or dislike for that person up close. I just put out this thought, see what you think. Gut dysbiosis. That's when, when the microbes in your gut are not in balance. There are good guys and bad guys, and ones that help certain functions, medical functions in your system. I propose that that's a cause, one cause at least, of recent horrific mass shootings in schools and public places. And you can question that. The vagus nerve, it's the nerve that provides two-way communication from the brain to the gut and the gut to the brain. In other words, your gut is speaking to your brain and your brain is speaking to your gut. And you can feel it sometimes. You get very emotional, you get upset. Your gut feels upset. That's because of the communication through the vagus nerve. The holobiome are all the microbes in and on the body, plus what we see in the mirror. Professors Justin Sonnenberg and Eric Sonnenberg stated, microbes are our partners throughout life, and if we can nurture and care for them, they will in turn protect us, the human bodies that we call home. Pheromones and sexual attraction. Humans, like many creatures, produce sexual attractants called pheromones. They're made by bacteria, largely in sweat. Sweat glands are located in the armpits, genitals, breasts, palms of your hands and feet. Sexual attraction is more than meets the eyes. Dear Josephine, I am coming home in 3 days, don't bathe. A kiss on your heart and one much lower down, much lower. Statement by General Napoleon Bonaparte in a message. Marie Joseph Rose was born in 1763, the eldest daughter of a noble French family. She met Napoleon in 1795. She was 6 years older and already the mother of 2 children. Napoleon fell deeply in love with her and gave her the nickname Josephine. Question, was Napoleon's attraction to Josephine largely about her microbes? Hormones and other chemicals are released by the gut microbiome and they influence us very strongly. Serotonin, dopamine, butyrate, GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid. They are produced by our gut microbiome. What do these substances do to us? Are they talking to us through these substances? Let's take an example of serotonin. You can't live without it. They influence our appetite, sleep, memory, mood, behavior, depression, muscle contraction, cardiovascular function, aging, bone metabolism, wound healing, migraines, and your libido. Those guys produce the serotonin. The microbiome is key to evolution and new species, according to Seth Bordenstein, professor of biological sciences at Vanderbilt University. Microbes made us, they're in us, and they evolve us. So what do you do about the microbiome to make it healthier for you? You've got to feed the microbiome human food. We are not carnivores, we are omnivores, first of all, so you understand what human food is. Feed your microbiome foods containing fiber. Microbes in your gut live on that fiber, and they make all the good chemicals that you need to survive, including serotonin and other things. And realize there's no fiber in meat, dairy, or eggs. Excessive animal food like sugar, artificial sweeteners, high fructose corn syrup, and alcohol lead to dysbiosis and illness. And I suggest eat fermented food daily. Of course, if you're buying the stuff, not making it, we make it at home. Rinse out the added salt if you're using salt to ferment your vegetables. And get adequate sleep and exercise. Now, if you don't include fiber in your diet, the microbes eat you. You need to feed them. What does that mean? Scientists introduced bacteria from human guts into the intestines of lab mice and examined their gut lining. In fiber-less diets, bacteria ate away at the gut lining, allowing dangerous bacterial infections. A diet rich in purified soluble fiber, as found in heavily processed food and supplements, was likewise detrimental. A dietary fiber-deprived gut microbiome degrades the colon. Degrades the colon mucus barrier, leading to gut diseases and possibly dementia. If that colon mucus barrier is degraded, microbes can get through into your bloodstream and do havoc in the brain. Let's look at soil. Soil is a living being, and it's filled with microenvironments and niches, says Kate Scow, UC Davis professor of soil science and microbial ecology. We're dependent on the soil microbiome. A pinch of soil contains a huge number of and variety of microorganisms. Millions, if not billions, of organisms of all kinds. And they're needed. They're responsible for nutrient release from organic matter in the soil. They help in fixing nitrogen and releasing phosphate, which can be taken up by plants. You're probably hearing a lot about fecal transplants these days. They can cure some specific diseases. At the outset, I warned, don't take microbes to cure something without medical advice. But fecal transplants are becoming more and more important and may cure a number of diseases. This is still in its infancy, except for very particular diseases. For example, scientists in the UK transplanted fecal microbes from young to old mice. This reversed inflammation-linked aging in their gut, eyes, and brain. Conversely, microbes from old mice transplanted into young mice resulted in inflammation in the brain and depleted a key protein required for normal vision. Applications are being considered for human trials. Would anyone here like to? And are you ready for a fecal transplant? I'm not yet. In summary, microbes make us human. They profoundly influence us physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So what's bugging you? Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. I think most of you know the drill here. We open it up to a question and answer session for the audience. Please come forward. And also, is anyone monitoring the group that's we're not doing that this week? Oh, okay. So if we get someone calling in or sending in a message, oh, you're going to do it. Zach's going to do it up here. Okay. So we'll look to Zach. We'll try to alternate, but come to the microphone, distance, please, and then we'll ask questions.
Hey, Norm, are microbes in our blood? And if so, I often wondered, lots of our diseases seem to involve our blood. And I've often dreamed that we'd be able to get not just fecal transplants, but blood transplants, and we'd have new good blood. Can you help on that?
Yes, I think microbes, if they get into our blood, can do a lot of damage. So I think in rare cases, yes, they'll be in blood, but it's not something that you want to have get into blood. As I mentioned, when that gut lining is perforated, they can get into blood. That's dangerous if they get into blood.
I'm a dermatologist, and there's been increasing over the past decade or so attention paid to the cutaneous microbiome because it definitely influences many diseases. Just a very simple thing, eczema, atopic dermatitis, which presents in infants, can be influenced by changing the microbial environment of the skin. And we have traditionally used antibiotics for Staphylococcus aureus, which I'm sure you've all heard about, MRSA being one of them. And that has a double-edged sword. It gets rid of some of the bad bacteria, but it also gets rid of the good bacteria. And talking about fecal transplants, cutaneous transplants can be very beneficial if we put the resident bacteria that belongs there to keep the bad bacteria away. So you're going to see more of this kind of thing. You may see creams, lotions, and things that contain microbes on, good bacteria on purpose. So look for that. I would not be surprised if Pfizer at all is marketing these things within the next 5 to 10 years. And one would hope the FDA will review it appropriately and in a rapid manner. The other comment I wanted to make is, I think we've all heard that older folks, such as ourselves, will say that dealing with their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren keep them young. And I wonder if it's a fecal transplant by default as one changes the diapers and doesn't wash their hands. So I think I'm going to be a little less cautious with my granddaughter and get some of her colonic bacteria on me.
Thank you for the comment. That brings up a number of statements. Having dogs around is a good thing generally because they provide transplant of bacteria. And dogs, if you watch, they're hunting constantly. As you take them out for a walk, what are they hunting for? Perhaps another dog that's around, but they won't touch poop that's in the grass that's more than 2 weeks old. They seem to know that, right? It has to be fresh. Yeah, I'm reminded of the story of a person who purposely hasn't bathed for most of his life, more than 20 years, didn't bathe, and very healthy skin, doing very well. I don't know that I want to have him as a friend, get up close with him, play bridge with him, but there you go. He believes that he's healthier as a result of that. We bathe too much.
You know, my brother-in-law,
Do you see him often?
One of our questions from the Zoom chat is, can you please explain more about butyrate and its importance? What is the best way to increase it in the gut?
How to increase the good bacteria and things.
Butyrate in the gut. And what is the best way to increase, can you please explain more about butyrate and its importance? What is the best way to increase it in the gut?
The best way to increase these organisms, the good guys, is to eat lots of fiber. Fiber in foods that are fibrous, a banana, broccoli, an apple. There are many foods that contain loads of fiber. And again, meat, dairy, eggs, animal food do not have fiber in them. When the tiger attacks the antelope, the first thing I'm told that the tiger will do is rip open the stomach area and eat the intestines. Why? Because they get all the fiber, and they get all the fiber, and they get the microorganisms. They don't know that, of course, but and then they crawl up into some tree and digest all that animal food. It's more easily digestible when they have fiber in their gut and when they have all the microbes that they need to help digest.
So what are your thoughts on apple cider vinegar that you hear
Apple
so much
cider
about every
vinegar?
day? Yeah.
Well, I have looked into it. My thoughts are, number one, it's acidic. Acids kill microorganisms. The acidity, I can't believe is good for your bones. That could help with bone loss. You don't want that. Those are my takes on it. I know that there are people who really believe in taking a cup full of that or whatever amount daily, if not more than a cup daily. So that's my thought on it. I'm happy to hear. I don't take it personally, but I'm happy to hear any other comments about it.
I've been practicing medicine long enough that I've seen a whole lot of fads come and go. At one time, cutaneous problems were due to hypothyroidism. And then it's this, and then it's that. And, you know, we are, as a society, we go through these fads. And cider vinegar has been a fad now for perhaps a decade dermatologically. And to my knowledge, there's absolutely no evidence that it has any benefit other than maybe as a placebo. And I have nothing against placebos, but I think it's probably true that this becomes part of the zeitgeist. People assume it, they tell their friends and neighbors. And I think that's what's happening. I think there's a great paucity of any scientific evidence that it's of any use.
In fact, if you look up apple cider vinegar, its benefits and its dangers, you'll find exactly that there are virtually no benefits.
When we were young, ulcers were caused by stress and all these things, but they just discovered they're caused by a bacteria. So ulcers are caused by a bacteria.
Yes,
And there was one thing on one of your slides, I think you sort of referred to our human cells as bacteria, but they're not,
okay.
Yeah.
If I'm getting your question right and giving you the right answer. Most every cell in your body is bacterial. First of all, we were made by bacteria as we evolved. But even the mitochondria in the energy producing organelle in your cells comes from bacterial origin, right? Our energy producing cells in our bodies. Most of our bodies are made up of bacteria, viruses, microorganisms. Is that the answer to?
yeah, well, they distinguish bacteria from eukaryotic cells. I'm not a bio person. They're not, the human cells are not bacteria. They're like bacteria. They came from bacteria, but they're not bacteria as formally defined.
No, they're bacterial in origin. They aren't bacteria.
With so many trillions of bacteria, is there any value in determining specific bacteria that are responsible for a specific disease process?
Well, we have a microbiologist here. Bacteria specific for diseases, yes. Many have been isolated from people who have diseases, and we have a good idea of what bacteria cause disease, if that's the answer to your question that you're looking for. And when you have a disease of the gut or skin or whatever, usually it can be identified analytically. Yeah.
Say this bacteria is responsible for arthritis or disease.
More specifically. That's a good question. I don't have an answer for that question. It may be a group of bacteria responsible for that. But when I mentioned dysbiosis, it could be so you have 2,000 roughly different bacteria in your gut. That dysbiosis, the change in the good guys, the bad guys, and any of the guys could be responsible for the disease. In other words, it's not necessarily one bad actor. It could be many together. Yeah. So I can't answer that question. Maybe a microbiologist might help.
Are you essentially recommending a vegan diet, or thoughts pro and con about a vegan diet?
Am I recommending a vegan diet? Some 36 years ago, my wife and I became vegan, except for a little fish. That's all the animal food that we have. We're macrobiotic. That's what we learned about macrobiotics. Do I recommend a vegan diet? I think for some people it would be excellent. For some people, no. I think it's the healthiest diet you could possibly have, a vegan diet, but where you have to be careful where you're getting your protein from. A vegan diet can also include, if you want to put it in that classification, it could include a lot of sugar. It still becomes vegan, right? But sugar is bad for you. Lots of sugar is bad for you, as well as lots of salt. And so you need to look into what a vegan diet means for you. My wife and I are vegans, essentially, except for a little fish. That's what I've said.
It's clear that humans are suffering now from are having used so many antibiotics generally that we're becoming immune to the antibiotics. But what are we to do when we have an infection and you don't want to keep living with the infection because it causes problems, and the doctor recommends an antibiotic? It seems that we need really narrow antibiotics that are aimed at specific infections, but that may be hard for Pfizer to do and make money. So what's the answer for us just as patients with doctors?
I think that's a very good question. When I got out of school, my first job was with Bristol Myers, big manufacturer of antibiotics. They would hand out bottles of that. Take these home, put them in your refrigerator. You may need them one day, right? Not a good idea. I believe antibiotics are a necessity when there's no other answer. Can you let the fever cure you? Can you cure it naturally? Don't rush, with a cold. I need an antibiotic, doctor, right now. I'm dying from this cold. No, you don't want to tell your doctor that. What you should be saying when the doctor prescribes that antibiotic, do I really need this? That's going to upset my gut. That's going to kill off the good guys and the bad guys in my gut. So yeah, it's a big question. If it's life-threatening, sure, you've got to do it. If there's no other answer.
Quick question. Would you recommend probiotic supplements in general? And getting back to Bob's question, would you recommend it if someone is on an antibiotic?
Yes, I would recommend probiotics. But my wife and I have taken the position that we don't want the store-bought probiotic. You can make your own probiotics. All you have to do is ferment some vegetables, and you'll get more probiotics in a spoonful of that than, they have labeled, we have 50 billion organisms per pill. Well, you'll get more than that. How about 1 trillion per spoonful, right? If you need it, but it's natural. That's the difference. You don't know what you're putting in your body when you really buy that probiotic that is made commercially. That's my opinion. Maybe people disagree. If you're on antibiotics, yes, you probably need probiotics to try to bring back some semblance of your gut bacteria that have been destroyed by the antibiotics. Don't know if that helps.
Yes, I have a question about family diseases. When you go to a doctor's office very frequently, it's what did your mother have? What did your father have? All this. So if you have a list of things that were in your family, my question is, how can you reverse that?
Yes. Again, I'm not a physician. If there's some kind of genetically transferable disease because of your genetics, you really have to see a specialist. If some genetically disease that has afflicted family members, you want to find out more about it. I mean, searching my family, I can pick out certain diseases that seem to be prevalent, right? And in one case, I even called up my cousin and asked, what are you doing about it, right? I have a slight tremor in my hands. What are you doing about it? And he says, virtually nothing. I don't want the drugs. I don't know what the drugs will do to the rest of my body. Right? Yeah, it's a good idea to know your family propensity for certain kinds of diseases. And when the doctor asks, tell me about your family, your mother, father, and so on, what did they have? Did they have cancer? Did they have bone disease? Whatever. Those are good questions.
I'm a retired pediatric cardiologist, and I don't profess to be an infectious disease expert. But on the other hand, antibiotics do have a place, right? And I think one needs to be very, very cautious to tell people not to use antibiotics when they're needed, right? Now, we live in a symbiotic relationship between the microbiomes that are in our body and our existence, right? Just to correct Bob, that we don't become immune to antibiotics, right? Our bacteria become immune to antibiotics. And one of the problems that we've had over the years with Staphylococcus, right, is that with the overuse of antibiotics, the Staphylococcus has become resistant to the antibiotics that you're using, right? But use of antibiotics is very important in the care of patients who have various types of bacterial diseases. And it's very, very important to know that if you use too much antibiotics, all right, and your example is a very good one, that when somebody has a cold and they go to the doctor and they say, I need, well, no antibiotics take care of viruses, right? Antibiotics kill bacteria. And if you have a bacterial disease, it is important for you to take an appropriate antibiotic. If you have a viral infection, the antibiotics are of no value. They may protect superinfection, where bad virus illness makes you ill.
Bacterial illness.
The bacteria then overcome them. But in most circumstances, viral illnesses should not be used with antibiotics.
Right. Thank you.
Is there any evidence the healthy population, or what you call the good guys, will inhibit the invasion of bad guys?
Any evidence, as I understand your question, for population of the good guys, the good bacteria, inhibiting the bad bacteria? Yeah, there's a constant war that goes on in your gut, for example. The good guys killing off the bad guys. They want the space. They don't tolerate often the bad guys coming down through your gut, and they will help fight off. You've got a healthy microbiome, they'll help fight off bad guys coming down your gut.
So we're going to wrap this up. As Bob has mentioned in previous talks, we are dependent on your support to provide us with some of the things that we need to do here at the science group. And Bob has provided a basket on the outside, the vestibule here. So if you feel comfortable making a contribution, we'd appreciate it. Also, Dr. Weinberg has left a copy of his new novel, a science fiction novel here, and it's $20, and any contribution or any purchase of that will be donated to our science group. Next week, we're going to have a presentation by Professor Stephen Still on self-driving vehicles. So please come back for that. And please join me in thanking Dr. Norman Weinberg for his presentation.
Thank you.